Hi there folks, Saber Four here, back with part 2 of our meta beating guide. Part 2 here is going to look at Han Solo and Cad Bane. Hello little dog, hello you tiny terrorist. This series we're going to look at kind of some of that reset meta. We've done part 1 already, and part 1 looked at a little bit more aggressive type plays, and that was Quinlan Vos and Sabine. This time we're going to see Han in a couple variations and Cad in a couple variations. We'll follow this up with part 3, which I've already gotten written, which is about Bosk and some control. A couple of these pieces are going to be kind of familiar because we're going to talk about the weaknesses in meta decks and then playing into a wider field. So here we go. Jango out of the picture. We expect the new meta is going to be the 5 that we kind of mentioned there, with a few filtered in that are part of different pillars. And we'll talk about those in just a second. Quinlan Vos we already covered. Sabine we already covered. These are the aggression pillars. They are going to be a little bit faster decks. They are a little bit more vulnerable to mid-range decks, which we're going to look at some today. They're pretty favored into heavy control decks, which we'll look at in part 3. So what we're going to look at this time is Han 1, the removal of DJ, allowing some space for some other decks to come in, but it also takes a little bit of a crutch away from Han players. And makes the green version of this deck a little bit more palatable to some people. So just kind of being aware of both of them. This game is paper, rock, scissors. Aggressive beats mid-range, mid-range beats control, control beats aggression, but not always. And so that's kind of how we expect this to go. You know, you still have card draw, you still have play lines, you still have pilots. And by pilots, I mean the people who are running the deck. And those matter as well, instead of just which type of deck you are playing. Structural weaknesses, I'm not going to just cover in every single one of these, but know that each of those types of decks, or each type of deck that you're playing against, might have a structural weakness in addition to the pillar. If we're trying to beat these, we need to understand our pillar, and we need to attack their structure. And so what we're going to do is show you how some of these things are structured and what you can do to deal with them. Han Solo. Han's, specifically, we're talking about Han 1. Han Solo is a resource cheating deck, and we're going to look at him in 2 variations. Han's play pattern in yellow is to play ahead of curve. He is able to put down an extra resource early, use that to be out ahead on curve, and so play a 3-drop on turn 1. And then we want to disrupt our opponent's moves using bounce effects, event pumps, and push board advantage. The 5 to 7 jump is a big thing for him still, and that's where we move from a fair game where we're maybe a little bit ahead with our unit, but we were having to blow up resources in order to do it, into our end game in 1 turn. The leader ability continues to allow you to play units ahead of curve, and you're going to be able to control the board state, or Han Yellow is going to be able to control the board state with things like Cunning, Waylay, and Infus Nest. Ambush is more common in Cunning, but you buy a lot more units into it in green just by the fact that you have a bigger pool. And Ambush can often 2-for-1 by ambushing units that are above the curve into something that that's not going to defeat it. Han's play pattern in green, if at all possible, might not play a unit on turn 1. Han in green would love to slap down resupply and be permanently a resource ahead. That permanent advantage on resources combined with leader action moves the 5 to 7 jump up a turn. And so now on the 3rd turn of the game, they can play things that cost 7, which utilize things like U-Wing to widen the board, or to put down multiple units at once, or just to put down one of their biggest and best. And example decks are coming up. So this is kind of the post-Jango Han Yellow. You see in here that you have a lot of diversity. You've got hotshot blasters as reach. You have a C-3PO, but take a look at the rest of the units. The rest of the units have a ton of 3 cost. And so C-3PO is down there, and every time he gets an attack, you're going to be guessing 3. Everything Boshek, Bodhi Rook, Ezra, both Millennium Falcons, Rogue Operative, Stolen AT Hauler, and Tech are all 3s. So the chance that you're going to draw a card off of that is quite high. And then you have things like Cunning, Cantina Bouncer, A New Adventure, and this one can use Waylay as well to be able to do things like if that stolen AT hauler goes to the other side to claw it back. Infus Nest and Han Solo are his top end. Notice that, this is a mid-range deck, so the top end isn't incredibly heavy, but getting Infus Nest onto the board, especially if you're able to put that Hotshot Blaster on her, can be just crippling for other decks, because if you're getting her out a couple of turns early based on the resources that your opponent has, and now she's bouncing back anything that's a power of 7 or less, is just incredibly crippling. Han Green, this variation still runs some of the same things. It's got a little bit heavier influence of ambush from your green expansion that's there. One of the things I want to talk about that's in this one that is not in the other is right here, Guerrilla Soldier. I could put this in both. I haven't put it in both yet, but Guerrilla Soldier at a turn 1 play, because this is a little bit less focused on getting those 3s down, and it has more of those 2s because you want to be able to use U-Wing and kind of maximize what's there. A super powerful turn 1 play for them is to go ramp up the resource, put down Guerrilla Soldier, and then put down resupply, and then the turn later, ramp up the resource again, go Guerrilla Soldier into Surprise Strike, and the likelihood that they're going to be able to clear a turn 1 play and then swing at the base for 5 is a real threat with this deck, because that's kind of putting it right out and off to the races. There's smaller units in green because U-Wing wants to be able to put out lots of them. But the top end of the deck still remained the same. It's right here at Han and Infus Nest. Playing into Han. Han can always be ahead of Quinlan's Ping because he's able to put down 3s instead of 2s on turn 1. And that makes things a little bit more challenging. Using something like Spark or Bazine early, it can remove his turn 1 play and make it where he just kind of blew up a resource to do nothing. Now, it's likely as a Han Solo player that I'm going to have more than one option at 3, but you can kind of mitigate some of those choices. Han's ability does 2-for-1 himself. And so if you are able to remove one of those units without incurring significant damage, if he put something down that was ahead of curve, he had to blow up a resource to do it. You remove 2 cards from his deck in order to make that play happen. Be aware of that 5-7 surge. Han Yellow can jump and flip can jump on his flip, play his leader ability, play a big unit, and then green can either hit a big unit or U-Wing the board to a wide state. Cunning is a real powerhouse in double yellow, able to exhaust 2 of your units, pump 1 of his. But Surprise Strike and the DL-44 Hotshot are probably the more dangerous reach cards, especially because a blaster on Infus Nest makes her a gigantic problem. Green's first turn ramp can also be incredibly problematic because it permanently puts Han up a resource, because now, he's going to have to blow up, but he's got 4 of them. And so he's going to have 3. You're going to have, you're going to be going into your 3 resource turn. So something like having Cham Syndulla in here against a Han player can be incredibly, incredibly valuable. The kill on sight cards depend on where you are in the game. Tech is not as impactful as he used to be, but it does give Han a bigger hand, which is beneficial because he has to put down a card from hand in order to add that resource. And so getting rid of Tech narrows his hand quite a bit and makes it much tighter for him to do his tricks. Late in the game, Infus Nest needs to be answered immediately. Otherwise, she's going to bounce back your units, and you're not going to be able to really interact with her at all. Granted, she is once per turn, but it's a huge, huge power play for Han. Let's move on to Cad Bane. Cad Bane's play pattern revolves entirely around the underworld synergy. Red Cad is often paired with Tarkintown. Prefers to play Crafty Smuggler after a unit is played and will ping and then Tarkintown to clear that first turn. Blue, however, is less likely to pass. Blue is okay with slapping down Pike Sentinel and moving on with the turn, keeping initiative in the process to be able to play control cards into your first turn play. Red is mostly a unit progression. Blue is going to play some control and do things to slow down the game a little bit and get it into that bridge to Cad Bane. Bridging to Cad is now easier without Jango and DJ because Cad's units are going to be able to attack. And without DJ there to permanently steal a resource, Cad is more likely to be able to flip on curve. Late in the game, you're going to see capture cards out of Cad Bane. So Relentless Pursuit is going to be a card that either the leader plays or is going to play later on after the Cad Bane unit is on the table. And it's going to be able to capture something and give it a shield and give that unit a shield because both of those things are bounty hunters. This is the Cad Bane Red variation. You'll notice in here a couple of things. Everything is Underworld with the exception of like No Good to Me Dead. So just about anything that gets played here, No Good to Me Dead and the Blaster. Just about everything in here that gets played is going to be able to activate Cad's ability. And so it's going to be able to put some damage into your units. This is the blue variation that is extremely similar to what George the Hulk did in Beatle. I had a few cards that were changed from his list, and I'd been working on this a little bit independently, and I did not go to that, so I didn't see this deck, but I understood that this was a very minor change from what he had run there and ran with great success. I have not updated this one yet because I would be taking Commandeer out of the sideboard here, but notice that this is a little bit less heavy on the units because you're playing a little bit of things that are outside of synergy to play Power of the Dark Side, to play Snoke, to play No Glory Only Result. So you're clearing units a little bit more with this with your events. It also runs a bit heavier of a smuggle package with things like Covert Strength and Jetpack and Lom Pike, as well as the Smuggler Starfighter over here. This is a more control-oriented, but still the top end kind of remains the same. It's the Cad Bane unit, and here the Supreme Leader Snoke. Lom Pike does a lot of heavy lifting here by placing shields on things that you can then remove with things like No Glory Only Results, Power of the Dark Side. Playing into Cad Bane. Space heavy decks, especially fighter heavy decks, should be aware that as a Cad player, I'm likely to. I've got plenty of twos. I'm likely to mulligan to see if I can get Sedanathano in my hand because that's a free kill instead of me having to use Tarkintown. Space heavy decks should consider a different unit turn one if they can because you're going to leave them able to use Tarkintown later if you do not. Always expect your units to have damage from Cad's plays, but you get to direct the damage. So putting that damage, getting to a wider board early is beneficial because the first time that you can put down your second unit, now you can have one that will soak damage a little bit and one that, especially if you're going to be able to trade into one of his units or you expect to trade into one of his units, you're able to put some damage there and let it be and let one of your units be at full health. Shielded units are a big problem for Cad, and Lurking TIE Phantom essentially turns his ability completely off. Sedanathano is a great card for him there because he can put Ithano on the board, not have to use his ping, and then put Sedan onto the Lurking TIE Phantom and destroy it. But that's kind of a way around it for him, and not a long way around, but that's kind of a workaround to get his unit or to get his ability back online. As a 6-cost leader, Cad is very much a mid-range deck. His top end is powerful, but not as big as some of the control variations that we will see tomorrow. There are Sentinels, some possible roadblocks that are in all Cad Bane decks. Contracted Jumpmaster is a good space unit that's in yellow. Gamorrean Guards is a good possibility. It's a decently strong unit at 4, and you're going to play a lot of yellow. You're going to play a lot of yellow units. So the Gamorrean Guards are, while a conditional Sentinel, they usually have it online. Blue has other options like the Pike Sentinel, but a lot of these things still come out with that Underworld synergy. Reach cards in CAD are kind of rare, so don't be expecting Cad Bane to come out very often and run things like Surprise Strike or to go Cunning for 6 and really push you with that. It relies more on that heavy synergy and especially on that Cad Bane unit late in the game to kind of clear the path, because he comes out and captures up to 3 units with 8 health, with 8 total health, but he gets to ping first, and so that magic number is either 9 or 10 depending on if the leader is still on the board. Blue has a little bit higher top end, and it's a little more control focused. The wide field. I've said this in the first round. I'm going to kind of repeat it here. If you are tooled specifically to beat a meta matchup of choice, and we do not see it in round 1, what happens? We need to be able to play decks that play fairly, and by fairly I mean that are as close to 50-50 or a little bit in our favor as we can against a bigger field, so that we have less impact of sitting down against the wrong deck match 1. We need to be fair into our pillar. We need to be good against our strength. We need to tech for our weaknesses. Your sideboard needs to be adaptable. Playing a post-board game into your weakness should feel, or against the mirror, should feel very different than playing your main deck. And you should have tech in there that, and I mean by tech, not the unit tech, but you should have tech in there that changes the nature of a weakness or mirror match. And then some common curve points to be aware of. 3 resources is where Cad Bane might use something like McClunky. I love the Cad Bane line of Crafty Smuggler, ping Tarkintown, swing my Crafty Smuggler, pick him back up with McClunky using 4 damage to possibly clear a turn 2 play, and then putting my Crafty Smuggler right back down. And that's a lovely line for Cad Bane. 5 resources is the turn where Han can race from 5 to 7 and can really kind of do some of his big tricks and make the game less fair, make the game more in his favor. And then 8 HP, and that is the total where the Cad Bane unit can, what the Cad Bane unit can capture. But unless you have defeated the Cad Bane leader that turn, that happens after the ping. And so, if the unit, you're talking 10 health. And so, if you're putting things down on the board, just be aware that that's a spot where Cad is going to run his capture mechanic. Thank you guys for listening. We will come back with part 3 a little bit later on. And part 3 is going to focus a little bit more on the control decks. It is written, it is put together, but I don't have time to video and edit it right now. Stay tuned to the channel for that, and please like the video and subscribe. It really helps grow our reach. Other resources for these will be in the description, and we will see you next time.